Honestly, the moment I heard the early details of this story, I was genuinely shocked by how blindly the wife prioritized her own family over everything else. To me, this isn't just a financial disagreement. It feels like a direct betrayal of her own child's future. What I personally find unacceptable is how she could calmly drain an education fund that the father spent years saving, just to buy a house for her irresponsible younger brother. That level of selfishness is something I find extremely difficult to justify. And if you think family always means unconditional sacrifice, this story will feel like a harsh wake-up call. Let's see how the husband steps in to clean up the damage and fight to restore what was meant to protect his child's future.
Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Lexington, in the heart of Kentucky, was the kind of town where almost everyone crossed paths in some way. Whether at local restaurants, shops in the historic downtown, or Sunday farmers markets, faces became familiar over time. It was in this setting that Miles Thompson and Jenna seemed to live one of those marriages everyone admired. They'd been together for nearly 10 years, and to outside observers, they were the definition of a calm, solid partnership. Miles owned a used car dealership he'd inherited from his father and turned into a local staple. A tireless worker, detail-oriented and respected by both customers and competitors, he carried a reputation built patiently through honesty and total dedication to his work. Jenna, on the other hand, always leaned more toward creativity. After years working as an administrative assistant at various companies, she decided it was time to try something new, something that truly reflected her identity. With encouragement from friends and Miles' support, she started making custom t-shirts at home. At first, it was small, just a few designs for people she knew, but word of mouth quickly gave the little business momentum. She set up a space in the back room of their house, with a modified table, paints, fabrics, and a printing machine she taught herself to operate. It was her way of pursuing personal fulfillment without giving up the comfort of home life. Their daily routine had a lightness few couples managed to keep after so many years. During the day, Miles ran the shop with careful attention, while Jenna split her time between orders, researching designs, and managing the household. At night, they naturally found each other again, like two people who respected their own rhythms but never failed to reconnect. They often hosted friends for small gatherings that had become almost a weekly ritual. On Fridays, their backyard was usually lit up with simple string lights, a speaker playing 90s music, and wine glasses passing between conversations. Jenna made sure to prepare snacks, while Miles arranged chairs, tested out new board games, and kept the freezer stocked with ice. Their friends, a tight-knit and consistent group, loved spending time at their place. There, everything seemed balanced. No awkward fights, no heavy silences. Jenna and Miles treated each other with an easy affection, like people who shared far more than just an address. They shared decisions, memories, plans. In public, their affection was subtle but present in gestures, exchanged glances, and private jokes no one else understood. And even when the house was quiet, they kept their own routines. On Sundays, they'd watch shows together on the living room couch, wrapped in blankets with bowls of popcorn balanced on their knees. Sometimes they'd go out to local restaurants, other times, they preferred cooking at home and eating on the porch. Their marriage was seen by many as a model. There was closeness, respect, and above all, stability. Social media posts were rare but always spontaneous, no showing off or over-romanticizing. Just two adults living together in balance, supporting each other through everyday challenges. When Jenna decided to invest in her t-shirt business, Miles was the first to celebrate. When he needed to renovate part of the shop, she was involved in every color choice and furniture layout. They moved side by side, without rushing or pushing. They were the kind of couple that gave others confidence, as if their story proved it was still possible to maintain a healthy relationship after so many years. In the neighborhood, they were well known. The couple with the red car in the driveway, the always tidy house, the quiet evening gatherings. Jenna was remembered for her original designs and her warmth when handling orders, while Miles was respected as someone fair and dependable, both in business and personal relationships. There was something about the way they lived that gave off a sense of calm. No big excesses, no forced displays. It was all simple, but genuine. This harmony, built over time through conscious choices, made no one around them doubt the strength of their marriage. And maybe that's why no one was ready for what came next. But up until then, everything seemed exactly as it should be. That afternoon, Lexington's sky was clear and the temperature mild. It was just an ordinary Wednesday, no rush, no plans, and Jenna had scheduled time to get ahead on a series of t-shirt orders due by week's end. She was alone at home, as usual on weekdays, and had already passed the halfway point when she noticed the printing machine was heating up more than normal. She found it strange but figured it was just from extended use. Still, she turned it off for a few minutes and opened the window to ventilate the room better. After a short break, she went back to work, determined to finish everything before Miles got home from the shop. Around 4 in the afternoon, when she turned the machine back on, what had seemed like a minor issue turned into a sharp pop, followed by sparks. Within seconds, the outlet started releasing smoke and a thin line of fire spread along the edge of the workbench, reaching flammable materials used for customizing the shirts. Jenna tried to smother the flames with a damp cloth, then ran to the kitchen to grab the small fire extinguisher she kept there. But by the time she returned, the fire had already taken over part of the room. Panic set in before she could think clearly. Smoke spread fast, the heat became suffocating, and the crackling sounds created an overwhelming sense of urgency. She ran upstairs, believing she'd be safer there. She closed the door to the master bedroom and opened the window for fresh air. Shaking, with her phone in hand, she called emergency services and gave her address in a shaky voice. Her words came out rushed but were understood. The operator assured her a team was on the way and told her to stay near the window, away from the smoke. Jenna tried to stay on her feet, but the pressure in her chest and the feeling of helplessness made everything spin. Looking down, she saw neighbors gathering in the street, pointing at the house filled with black smoke, and someone shouting for her to stay calm. A few minutes later, the first sirens cut through the air. The fire truck stopped in front of the house, and activity began immediately. From above, Jenna could see the firefighters preparing, organizing their gear, but the heat from downstairs was already making it hard to stand. That's when she noticed one of them stand out. Tall, with precise movements, gesturing with authority, he pointed to the ladder and started climbing with surprising speed. When their eyes met for the first time, there was a strange, hard-to-explain jolt. There was smoke, chaos, and panic all around, but that look, hers to his to hers, created an immediate connection. The firefighter climbed quickly and, once he reached the window, reached out his arm. Jenna grabbed his hand like it was the only thing keeping her conscious. He helped her through the opening carefully, holding tight, guiding each movement with precision. No words were exchanged. There was no time for conversation. When they reached the ground, he led her to a safe zone where another firefighter was already waiting with an oxygen mask. Jenna sat on the sidewalk, lungs burning, eyes stinging, body trembling from exhaustion and relief. Everything happened so fast it felt like a blur. But as she was being treated by a paramedic, her mind couldn't let go of that image. The face of the man who rescued her, partially covered by his mask, his steady eyes, his voice she barely heard but whose presence stayed with her. It was as if, in the middle of the shock, something inside her had been touched in a different way. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something else, more subtle yet more intense. Like that moment had opened a crack in some forgotten part of herself. Neighbors talked among themselves, praising the firefighters' quick response and the team's efficiency. Miles was called and left the shop immediately, arriving just minutes later, frantic. He found Jenna sitting, calmer now, wrapped in a blanket and surrounded by responders. He hugged her tightly, asked if she was okay, and she responded with a vague nod, still shaken. The firefighters began securing the area, and the house, especially the ground floor, was visibly damaged. Jenna didn't say much. She just stared ahead, like someone still trapped in a moment no one else had noticed. That night, even with her body exhausted and her eyes heavy from crying, Jenna barely slept. Their house had been condemned, and she and Miles were temporarily staying with a cousin while they waited for the homeowner's insurance process. The memory of the fire came in flashes, but what disturbed her most was the image of the man who'd reached his hand through the window. His face, his posture, the way he'd held her. She didn't know his name, nor did she understand this feeling that had emerged in the middle of the chaos. But she knew something inside her had changed. And no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the question kept echoing silently in her mind: why did that moment stick so deeply? There was no answer yet. But the first sign that her life would never be the same had just appeared. The fire had left deep marks, both on the house and on Jenna's thoughts. While Miles handled insurance paperwork and met with real estate agents to find a new home, she found herself increasingly disconnected from the world around her. They were staying with a cousin, improvising routines while trying to rebuild their lives. But no matter how hard she tried to refocus on work and daily tasks, Jenna couldn't push the image of the firefighter who'd rescued her out of her mind. That brief, silent moment kept replaying in her head, as if it meant something greater than she was ready to admit. Thanks to Miles' solid reputation with the insurance company, the claim was processed faster than expected. Within days, he closed a deal. Less than 3 weeks later, they had a new house. In the new home, Miles tried to rebuild what the fire had taken. Jenna smiled, unpacked boxes, said everything was fine. But inside, she was already somewhere else. Jenna tried to rationalize her feelings as simple gratitude. But the restlessness grew every time she closed her eyes. She felt a need to know who he was, as if that knowledge were part of a cycle that needed to be completed. She started discreetly searching for information. She looked up local news reports about the fire, watched videos from community channels covering the incident, and eventually found a short article showing firefighters in front of the house, commenting on the response. At the bottom of the video, a caption read, "Team from Battalion 3, including firefighter Cole Ramsey, who led the rescue of the resident." With the name in hand, the search became easier. She found the fire station where he worked, his shift schedule, even community events the station participated in. Without Miles knowing, Jenna began spending her free time near the area, making up excuses to be close by. Sometimes she'd stop at the corner market, other times, she'd pretend to browse nearby shops. She wanted to run into him by chance, as if fate were nudging them toward a natural reunion. And as often happens when someone searches hard enough, the moment came. It was a Monday afternoon when he was leaving the station and she was pretending to read a blood donation poster on the outside wall. He recognized her instantly, though he hesitated a second before speaking. She thanked him for the rescue with a restrained smile, and he was polite but direct. He said he'd just done his job, nothing more, but his look suggested this meeting stirred something in him too. Their first real contact happened right there. Then came others. An afternoon coffee at a quiet spot, messages that started with small talk and grew into longer conversations. Jenna told herself there was nothing wrong, that it was just gratitude extending itself. But deep down, she knew something was slipping out of control. Before they realized it, they were arranging meetings more discreetly. A distant park, a cafe where no one knew them, then a remote parking lot where he'd wait for her in his car. The meetings became frequent. And inevitably, they stopped being just conversations. She told Miles she was visiting suppliers, picking up fabric, delivering orders. Miles, busy with the shop, never questioned it. After all, she'd always been careful with her schedule. The physical relationship happened without rehearsal. During one meeting, inside his car, he held her hand longer than necessary. She didn't pull away. She just let it happen. When their lips met for the first time, there was no immediate guilt. Just an emotional release both seemed to have been carrying for weeks. Jenna left that meeting with her heart racing, but no immediate regret. It was as if something inside her had awakened from a deep sleep. In the days that followed, she tried to keep up with her routine, but there was always a latent anxiety, a new kind of anticipation filling the space once occupied by stability and predictability. Still, her conscience began to weigh on her. Jenna knew what she was doing was wrong. She thought of Miles, of the marriage so many admired, and for brief moments, she felt the weight of betrayal forming. But justifications quickly silenced the guilt. She told herself she'd never been unfaithful before, that this was different, that Cole had appeared during a time of fragility and chaos. That maybe this feeling wouldn't have happened if not for the shock of the fire. She even thought it might pass, that it was just a phase of emotional confusion. But the truth was, the more they met, the harder it became to stop the cycle. What Jenna didn't know was that someone was watching closely. A colleague of Cole's, also a firefighter and a longtime acquaintance of the Ramsey family, grew suspicious of how often Cole was leaving the station outside regular hours. Once, he saw Cole getting into a different car after his shift. Another time, he overheard fragments of a conversation suggesting something serious was going on. And though he didn't know all the details, he realized it involved a married woman. To him, it was unacceptable for a fellow firefighter to risk his reputation, and the department's, over something clearly beyond acceptable limits. Driven by personal integrity, he decided he wouldn't stay silent. The firefighter had lived in Lexington for years and attended the same church where Miles had been a wedding usher. One day, he saw an old photo on the church bulletin board and recognized the name, Miles Thompson. He discreetly looked into it and found out the wife had survived a fire that Cole had responded to. The rest was connecting the dots. Meanwhile, Jenna remained immersed in this parallel world, believing everything was still under control. But what seemed like a well-kept secret wasn't as invisible as she thought. And the risk of everything coming to light was closer than she could imagine. On a humid Thursday morning, Miles was at the shop reviewing weekly reports when he received a message from an unknown number. The notification appeared ordinary, like any other, but the content froze him completely. The message was direct, no beating around the bush. It said his wife was secretly meeting a firefighter named Cole Ramsey, that this had been going on for some time, and that very day, around 6 in the evening, they'd be together in a remote parking lot on the outskirts of an industrial area. The location was attached, along with a final warning that read like a caution, "Go and see for yourself." Miles read the message 3 times before he could process it. His first instinct was disbelief. Jenna had never given him reason to suspect anything, and despite the past few months being tough due to the fire and the move, he believed they were overcoming it together. But something in the tone of the message, the accuracy of the details, and the name of the firefighter, the same man who'd rescued her, created an unease he couldn't ignore. He spent the day distracted, thoughts racing, and when the clock hit 5:30, he closed the shop without telling anyone and drove in silence to the location. The parking lot was behind an old, inactive warehouse, surrounded by trees and with little activity. Miles parked a safe distance away and waited. A few minutes later, he saw a gray car approach. It was Jenna's car. She got out, quickly scanned the area, and stepped into the car already parked there. Miles recognized Cole immediately. His blood boiled. His chest tightened and his fingers trembled on the steering wheel. He took a deep breath, but seeing his wife enter another man's car made any attempt at rationality impossible. He got out and walked toward them. When he got close, Jenna realized too late. She opened the passenger door in a panic and stepped out, her face in shock. Cole also got out, confused, trying to understand what was about to happen. Miles didn't yell. His voice was firm, low, but carried a weight far more devastating than any outburst. "Do you have any idea what you've just done, Jenna? Do you even know what you're destroying?" Jenna tried to speak, but he didn't let her. "With this man? With this firefighter? Is this really happening? Did you replace me with someone you barely know? With someone who saved your life and then led you into this mess?" She, breathless, took a step forward. "Miles, I didn't plan this, I swear. I was vulnerable, the fire messed with me, Miles raised his hand, as if asking for silence. "It's not about the fire. It's about respect. About everything we built. I was by your side through every decision, every hardship. And this is how you repay me? Making me look like a fool while lying straight to my face?" Cole tried to step in, his voice hesitant. "I didn't mean to cause problems. It happened, but not with bad intentions." Miles turned to him, his gaze sharp. "You knew she was married. You knew. And you kept going anyway. What kind of professional does that? You're supposed to stand for safety, responsibility. Instead, you acted like a kid. This won't just end here. I'm filing a complaint against you. And you, Jenna, this is over. Completely over. There's no coming back." She started crying, trying to move closer, but Miles stepped back. His eyes were wet, but his posture was firm. He'd made his decision right there, in the middle of that silent parking lot, among the emotional wreckage that remained. Without giving time for further explanations, he turned and walked back to his car. The pain burned inside, but there was no room left for hesitation. Everything he believed he had with Jenna had been destroyed. And now, all that was left was dealing with the consequences. The consequences didn't take long to arrive. The day after the confrontation, Miles went to the fire department's internal affairs office and filed a formal complaint against Cole Ramsey, detailing the firefighter's involvement with his then-wife, despite knowing she was married. The complaint was taken seriously, especially because Cole had directly responded to the recent incident involving Jenna, which made the ethical breach even worse. The department immediately opened an internal investigation. Within weeks, after a preliminary review and internal statements, Cole was officially suspended for misconduct and violation of the Code of Ethics. Though the suspension was initially temporary, it remained indefinite with no clear path to return, effectively ending his role. The image of the dedicated professional unraveled, leaving behind a void hard to repair. Jenna, meanwhile, didn't even have time to try to fix things. On the same day of the confrontation, Miles asked her to leave the house. His tone wasn't aggressive, but firm and final. He said there was no room left for rebuilding and that any attempt to explain or soften things would only make it worse. Jenna packed a few clothes, documents, and the lighter equipment from the small studio she'd set up with the remaining insurance money, and moved in with her older sister, who lived in a more distant neighborhood. There, she stayed in the guest room and tried to reorganize her routine, now surrounded by constant silence and a growing emptiness that seemed to expand with every attempt to move forward. She went back to making t-shirts, adapting to the new space, but nothing felt the same. Orders still came in from loyal customers unaware of her story, but the enthusiasm was gone. Ideas stalled mid-process, designs lost their color, and even the simple act of using the machine brought discomfort. The space between prints was filled with thoughts circling endlessly. She thought of Miles, of quiet nights in the old backyard, of smiles during dinners with friends, of plans to renovate the garden, even of trivial arguments about movies or grocery shopping. Everything now felt distant, almost like it belonged to another life. She tried reaching out a few times. Sent short messages, no emotional appeals, just asking if he was okay, if he needed anything from her, if he'd want to talk, even if just to end things maturely. But Miles never replied. He'd read them and leave them unanswered. Jenna quickly realized there was no opening left. Miles had completely shut down, not out of pride, but because he was hurt in a way that wouldn't allow any reconciliation. And that hurt more than any shouting ever could. His absence was a constant echo in everything she did. Meanwhile, Miles focused entirely on the shop. He reorganized processes, expanded partnerships with nearby dealerships, renovated the building's facade, and even hired a new manager to help with sales. It was his way of filling the void left by the betrayal. When friends found out what had happened, they didn't hesitate to take his side. Many had known the couple since the beginning, sharing dinners, trips, and confidences. Now, learning about Jenna's infidelity, they felt deceived too. Messages stopped, invitations disappeared, and even those closest to her made it clear they couldn't remain friends with someone who had broken something so solid on impulse. Jenna noticed this distance gradually. Vague replies in group chats, long silences, invitations that never came. That support network that once made her feel safe was gone. Not out of malice, but consequence. And that consequence tormented her the most. There was no villainy, no public punishment. Just the silent withdrawal of people who once filled her life. Her sister tried to comfort her, saying things would get better with time, but Jenna knew it wasn't that simple. Some losses are final, and this one seemed to be one of them. Alone, surrounded by boxes of paint and fabric scattered on a makeshift bed, she began to understand, with pain and clarity, the weight of the choices she'd made. She wasn't the admired wife anymore, the host of happy evenings, the woman who radiated calm and balance. She was now someone trying to rebuild on the wreckage of a mistake she'd caused herself. And maybe that was the greatest punishment of all, knowing no one pushed her into that abyss, that everything she'd lost came from a decision that, however confusing it seemed at the time, was made by her own will. There was no going back. Just silence. And the long journey back to herself. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.
Looking back at the entire situation, I have to say this clearly. The wife and her younger brother may have their own explanations, but in my view, their actions reflect a complete moral failure driven by dependency and greed. From my perspective, taking away a child's future to support someone else's laziness is something I simply cannot accept under any circumstance. That's not family support, that's exploitation. What stands out here is the husband's response. He didn't give in to unreasonable demands disguised as family duty. Instead, he made a firm decision to protect what truly mattered, even if it meant being seen as harsh. And the key lesson here is simple. Kindness without boundaries becomes weakness. Never allow family ties to be used as an excuse to exploit your hard work. Money can be rebuilt, but once trust is broken and abused, it rarely returns the same in the end. The husband's decisiveness is a reminder that protecting your loved ones sometimes requires making uncomfortable but necessary choices. What do you think about the wife's actions? Does she deserve forgiveness after risking her own child's future? Or has she crossed a line that can't be repaired?